Welcome to Painting with Shawna on Thursdays. I'm so glad that you're here. If you're on YouTube, hit subscribe. If you're on Facebook, hit like. And if you're interested in tips and tricks that you don't see anyplace else, that I don't put anyplace else, I have a newsletter that you can sign up for. It comes out on Thursday or Wednesday at midnight, like last night. And this week's tip was how to photograph a birds with black feathers. And I had a couple of images, and I talked about how I deal with how dark and difficult they are to photograph. So that I have those kind of things. It's my birding adventures. It's a bunch of different things, different tips and tricks that I will be including each week in the newsletter. I'm just going to check here and make sure that I'm working here. Yeah, I should have checked that when I was on shutdown, but I forgot. Yeah, it's all these little details. Details. Okay, there we go. So you can see that I have the painting behind me. And right now, Corey on Facebook said it looked like candy corn. That lovely little Halloween treat that you can get at Halloween time. I don't know, you can buy it at other times maybe, but I don't pay attention for it. We're going to those yellows will start to be hidden with reds about on the layers that are coming today, that I'm starting with today. I'm really pleased with it, what I've gotten done so far. It's not all covered, but I'm getting a sense of where elements are and starting to put those pieces together. So we're going to move over here, and I'll turn on this camera over here, and I will move this painting over, and we will get started. Okay, let's get going. So the first thing I want to talk about is the colors that we're using on this painting. Piece of paper. I want to protect my painting. I don't want to put anything on it that shouldn't be on it. So the color that we're using are Winsor Red, which is not a completely transparent color, so I'm not going to use it as much as I am going to use the quinacridone red. I think that will get me to where I want it to be. And if I needed a little bit more yellow, I'm going to add in the new gamboge into it. So if I need it to shift more towards that orangey red, that's how I'm going to do it. Permanent alizarin crimson and quinacridone magenta. There are small little areas that seem to have that pinky purple color in it. So I want to float those colors in. You can see I've started floating them in these little areas. So we have new gamboge. We have phthalo green, which darkens the permanent alizarin crimson. And then I have on the green palette, and this is my green palette that I work from all the time. I have Hooker's green, I have burnt umber, I have neutral tint to help darken it down, but it's still, that's a very low chroma blue, the neutral tint, and so you still need to bring the brassiness down by adding the burnt umber. And I have, I just touched it and it's a little wet, the new gamboge over here as well. So in both of them, both areas, I'm going to be using new gamboge. I do have a bit of phthalo green blue shade, when I want to bring it more into that blue green, then I will use a little bit of that to add into the hooker's green. Okay, so let's get going. I'm going to spritz my colors. The nice thing about watercolor is you can just spritz water on top and it reconstitutes the paint. And I'm going to come up, take this down over here, keep my image close to me. And I have different size brushes for different size areas. And I'm going to come in over here. Just get my hand protected so I can put it down. I'm adding a little bit of water. I don't want a ton of water, but I want enough water to help this move. So I'm going to take some of that quinacridone red and add just a little bit of the New Gamboge so that I can bring it in and still keep that glow, because the quinacridone red, I'll put that up here so I can see it, is a transparent color. In fact, you can see how transparent it is on here. And then I'm going to use a combination of quinacridone red and the Winsor red. And now I've got too big of a brush. I'm putting too much paint on, so I'm going to change my brush to a different size. This is a size 6 from a size 8. And I'm not in a rush. Again, I mean, I say that every time we do this, that I'm not in a rush. I'm looking at my image, I'm thinking about what I'm seeing, and I'm putting a layer on that is a light layer that I can come back and put another layer on over top. Okay. And if you go over, you can come in with your paper towel and just clean up that edge a little bit. Always seems to take me a little bit to get my brush and my hand-eye coordination to all line up together. So if you're on Facebook, take a moment to say hi. That would be lovely to see who's here. And I hope you had a good week. Okay, so now I'm coming and I'm looking for the bright areas. So I'm going to come in and float in. This is a small enough area that I can just come in carefully with my brush and bring in that beautiful quinacridone red with a touch of the yellow, that's New Gamboge. That's why I have to have it next to me, because I'm concentrating and thinking at the same time. Not always a good combination. And a little bit of that beautiful Winsor red in to be the base. And you see in the center there, ooh, I'm going to have way too much paint on that, so let's get a little bit of water in. You see in the center, I'm going to now float in some of that quinacridone magenta. And I'm just going to barely touch it because I don't want them mixing too much. And I'm going to come in and I'm going to pull back that red, because I want that pinky red to be the focus. Okay. Now, okay, what am I looking at here? So let's start. The nice part about flowers is you have all this space to work in, and you can go from petal to petal to petal and never work next to each other so that they don't blend into each other. And I see a little bit of that pinky purple. Let's put that over top here. Okay. And we're going to take a little bit more of that quinacridone red and we're going to float it down here. And bring it carefully next to that really pretty pinky color. And then as I go down, I see that we're going into a place that has not as much, ooh, that's exciting, not as much light coming through, but we have little air, oh, those are just the little stamens. So we'll just keep that space. And we're going to just build up slowly, 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 slowly. And carefully keeping that shape, thinking about what shape I'm trying to create. And sort of round that out, round this out, come around here. Okay. And some of these petals, like the other flowers, hey Kathy, welcome. I'm glad that you made it. Okay, so I'm just thinking about the lighter areas of the petals. There's lots of, you can see here, there's lots of darker areas, but there's only sort of where the light is striking in these small areas. So let's just stay focused there. Let's make sure I'm not putting anything anywhere that shouldn't be touched. Okay. And I'm going to come in here. And I'm going to do the whole petal, even though I see that there's lots of darkness in here. That's another layer. That's going to be easy to do in another layer. I'm going to add some of that quinacridone magenta. And how are you doing, Kathy? How is it out in I think you're in the Seattle area, aren't you? In Washington State. It's been pretty dry down there. Okay, and I'm seeing a little bit more of that flirting of that quinacridone magenta. I put too much on. I'm going to come in with my brush and I'm just going to move it around. Now, I should have added water onto this area. I seem to have forgotten my ways of doing things, so this is when you get into trouble if you do things like this, because it starts to dry and you don't have enough time to move. So it's kind of dampish here today because we're supposed to be getting rain, but I don't know if we will or not. Okay, I'm going to clean that out, dry it off with my paper towel, and then move to another one. Well, let's move to this one. It's a darker one, but that's all right. We can, and I'm going to bring in a little bit of that quinacridone, that phthalo green, just a touch. I don't want to bring in too much. And I'm going to add New Gamboge because I kind of want to keep this orange glow that I see here. Right on the edge it's there, but I'm going to put it into the bigger area. And then I'm going to come in with a little bit more of that phthalo green. I'm working on the understanding that I can mix red and green together to bring down the chroma of the red and bring down the value of it. I add only a small amount of green, and as soon as my show is done, I'm going to happily get a new camera so you guys can see my mixing. But first things first, got to get to that show yet. Okay, and I see down here, like the darkness is here, but it's not as dark down here. So I'm going to take some of that quinacridone red with the new gamboge and put it down here too. It has a little bit of the darkness, but it's not too bad. Okay, float those colors in. Again, I forgot to do, let's get that. It's not like I haven't been painting all week in watercolor, and I've been doing it all week when I'm just concentrating by myself. I have no problems remembering to water down the petal. Okay, talking and communicating at the same time. So let's add, I'm going to get a bigger brush, or a different brush for adding the water in. Oh, no, that's not going to work for me. Let's see if, there we go. I just didn't have enough water. So I'm going to add some water using my longer version of the silver black velvet brush. You can see on this petal here, I've already started to put that darker cast shadow in there, but that's not my focus now. My focus is going to be adding that orangey red, and you can see that this is the background that needs to be fixed up, but I will do that at the end. I just put it in place so that I would know what I was looking at. Take a little bit of that phthalo green and some of the alizarin crimson with it to capture down here. That's pretty. That gives it a sense that it's moving. And then a little bit of the quinacridone red with the new gamboge to get that sort of orangey feel that I'm seeing here. And because there's just a hint of that green, that phthalo green in, you can see that that's not as chromatic. It's not as bright orange. It's perfect. It's exactly what we're looking for. Okay, let's go up here. There's no petal around that I've done yet, so let's do that. And there is that, well, let's get the brush and add some water first so we can move quickly. I don't need a lot of water. Okay, so I see that there's a hint of that orangey red here and here. Okay, and then it's moving away, and it's moving away more to the alizarin with just a touch of the phthalo green, so that it bends it away from the light more. And then with the quin red and a little bit of phthalo green to bring that chroma down and change it. There we go. And then there's some here as well, in between the two areas of the, and you can see how it's just floating in and blending into each other, but still keeping that hint of that orange available to see. Okay, and I can see I have some light areas here that I'm going to come and move that paint around and try and get rid of, because that's not helpful. And let's float a little bit more of that down here so that it's really bending away, and along here where it's really bending away. Okay, and leave that be and let it just do its magic. I do think that watercolor is magical. It is so pretty, and the blending of colors. Hey Judy, welcome. I'm so glad you're here. Okay, so let's go over here. We're going to stay focused. I mean, you know, we know that an hour doesn't last very long. I don't get a lot done, but I can see that I have right here a bit of that orange floating through because the light is striking right there. Like it's like it's in a cast shadow, like it's got a cast shadow across the petal, but just a subtle one. So let's just keep working on there. Again, I am definitely out of the groove of thinking about watering my petals here. And down here and up here. Let's get some water in there so that I can work and not worry about the amount of time it's going to take. Okay, so down, and I've just added a little bit more of that Quin Red. I'm going over into the black, and I really want to be careful because it will pull some of that in, and I don't really want that at this point in there. And the Quin Red here. And then we're going to pull it away by adding, show that it looks like it's moving, that the petal is moving away from the light by adding a little bit of that Quin Red and the phthalo green blue shade. Okay, and now I'm going to go into the alizarin crimson. Oh, I see that there's a little bit of that hint of orange there too. Okay, so take a little bit of that new gamboge, add it to the quinacridone red, and just do a hint. Ooh, a little bit too much paint on my brush. So I clean it off, I dry it with the paper towel, and then I come in and I carefully move it around. I don't want too much paint in here, and I don't want it to move into each other too much. So I'm going to be super careful when I come to touch the edges not to have too much paint and to have maybe a transition color in between. So let's get a little bit of that quinacridone red to be the transition color between the orangey area, the sort of the orange red, the yellow red, and the dark of the alizarin crimson. Okay, oops, we still have more to do here. Let's keep moving. I'm going to get a bigger brush because it's a bigger area. You really do have to think about what brushes you're using and what you're trying to accomplish, because when you're working in a small space, in a bigger space, you want to be able to move quickly. So I'm going to take some of that quinacridone red and with just a hint of the Winsor red and bring that around up here because I can see that there's a bit of that. Now, you see when I touch, it's not really blending into the orange because I've almost left it too long. And if I did leave it too long and it got streaky, I can fix that. I've got the technology and the skills, which I will share in November after I get through my show. I don't have it's a busy life, and it's summertime. I'm hoping summer is nice where you guys are and that you're getting enough rain. I know that that's been an issue every place. Except for here. We seem to be just getting enough rain to keep everything going. Oh, okay. I forgot to put my timer on after all that. Oh well, I can pay attention to the time. Okay, so we've done that one. We've done this one. You can see it's kind of blotchy. I'm not going to worry about that. This is just a layer, and we're putting other layers on top, so that's not a big concern. Here is a really pretty area. Again, that quinacridone red with the new gamboge. And let's get some water into there. put some water on the brush. That would be helpful. And I'm just filling that area with some water. And I'm going to float that pretty orange, that glow I'm seeing, in there. And then what I'm seeing is, yes, it's getting darker, but I don't want to get too dark. I will add that later. I just want to be able to get a value darker in than we're seeing right now. And I always want to create a bit of interest, so I'm coming in with the alizarin at the corners so that there's a color variation from sort of that orangey red into a blue red. There's a line there that seems like that's too much of a line. I'm just going to bring my brush and I'm going to blend it between. Okay, and then I'm going to bring the quinacridone red, and I'm going to bring it pretty strongly right in this area here, next to that orange, so that it has that blending area. Then I'm going to take some of that phthalo green with the quinacridone red and float it in between at the other end here. So that's a little bit too dark, so let's add a little bit of water and bring in that red more. You're feeling like you don't have control over the brush. It's always helpful to move to a smaller brush. That helps you to control your brushwork. And when you start painting, that hand-eye coordination is something you learn just by doing. Okay, now let's get to the top part of the petal. And that's a darker area again, but I'm going to do the quinacridone red. I'm seeing that about here. And then I see it moving more into the alizarin crimson here as it gets closer to this petal here that is taking some of the light away. Painting is all about value shifts. It's about light and dark and how they line up next to each other that makes the paintings look dimensional, even though they are perfectly not dimensional. They are flat pieces on flat pieces of paper. Now, I wasn't paying attention and I put my hand right there. Again, that's not a huge issue. I can fix that in the next layer. It would be an issue if I was trying to match up and I was, yeah, so pay attention, you know, get moving and I keep forgetting. Okay, so I'm going to leave that one and come over here then. I think that's what I need to do is move around a little bit more, let those dry, and then come back and add more. Here you can see I've got all that yellow. Let's wet the area first. So you know that that's where the orange glow is going to be, because that's where I've put the yellow so that I can navigate that glow. Okay. So I'll take the new gamboge and the quinacridone red and put it in. It's still pretty orange. I do want some of that variation of that in there. And I'm looking and I can see that it comes down into here, that the light is permeating this petal in a really interesting ways. And down into here. Okay, so now I'm going to take mostly the quinacridone red and come up here and bring it along as it comes down, I see that we're moving into the alizarin crimson with just a little bit of that phthalo green to bring that chroma down. And back, add some of the quinacridone red into what I had on my brush already. Okay, I'm happy with that. Come in and just tidy up the edges. Okay. Let's come up here and then down here, and hopefully by the time I get up here, other parts are dry. Okay, let's do this one here. I kind of like this shape because it reminds me, it looks like a heart shape. So it makes me feel like, oh, this is really pretty. I love heart-shaped stuff. Take some of that quinacridone red with the new gamboge, and now I'm going to just take mostly the quinacridone red and touch the edge. Clean my brush, grab the quinacridone red with a little bit of Winsor red. That Winsor red is so, like, it's not transparent, so it doesn't let the yellow show through, like glow like I want it to glow. Okay, and we're going to come down here, and we're going to come in here. And again, this is a small space, so I've been able to work fairly quickly, and I've got a lot of paint mixed on my palette, so I have the ability to clean and dry and not have to mix to make what's happening here flow together. Okay, bring that red in. Oops, not too much, because if you get too much, it's pulling into the other area, and I don't really want that to happen. So you have to be, water is both your friend and your enemy. And pull that over to here. Now, I can see that I could add a little bit more of that alizarin crimson with the phthalo green, and have this petal look like it's starting to turn away from the light, wherever that light source is, the amount of light that it's seeing. Get the edges cleaned up. Before I go into where that orange, that reddy orange color is, I'm going to tidy up my brush and make sure that I've got all the information I need. And I need it clean, my brush to be clean. I don't want to contaminate it with anything else right now. Okay, so let's come. We don't have anything wet around here. Let's do this one here. So this is just a push and pull back and forth, looking at and thinking about where we're at, and looking at the colors and, changing them just subtly here and there. Okay. Then I'm going to come with the quinacridone red, and I've put the more orangey color around, and I've done it on the dry because I don't want to lose those colors. And in fact, the next time I paint this, I'm probably not even going to touch those colors. I'm just going to leave those areas dry and work around it so that it gets to where I want it to be. I'm not seeing any of the fuchsia, that quinacridone magenta on this lower petals. Not at all. That seems to be where the light is striking at the top. Okay, so we're just coming in. We're going to touch there. And I have lots of paint, so I should be able to move fairly quickly so that I don't end up with a hard edge in there. You can see I've got a very hard edge here. I'm taking some of this alizarin crimson, the darker, and I'm just going to touch it to the edge there. And I dried off my brush so that I could just come in and move that paint around to where I want it to be. And I'm going to float some in here. And you can see as soon as it touches the other paint, it moves into it. So that's good. That's what I'm looking for. So I'm working on a drawing, and I'm hoping next week that I am doing, what's the painting I'm hoping to be working on? Delphiniums. That purpley blue, and my delphiniums are just nice and tall and look like they're getting ready to bloom at any point. So I will be able to bring in a little floret and show you the colors that I'm working from out of my Munsell book. But that is for next week. Okay, so let's come over to this one here. Get my hands so that I'm protected. Because I don't have any of that orange in there, I can come and wet this area because I'm not trying to keep the paint from mingling too much. It can mingle more here. Okay. These little pieces of paper really do help protect your paper from your hands, because of course our hands hold a lot of grease and oils and stuff, which is not always beneficial to paper. Paper absorbs it, and then it makes it difficult for the paint to actually do what I want it to do. So I'm doing the quinacridone red and a hint of the Winsor red into this corner here. And then I bet you can tell me what I'm going to do next, which is the alizarin crimson with a little hint of the phthalo green blue shade, because I can see it's quite dark in here. I'm not worried about making it that dark right now. I just want to get that intention into where I'm working. We just continue to work. Add a little bit of the phthalo green to the quinacridone red to bring that chroma down and to darken it a bit. It's really interesting because if you mix colors and you mix complementary colors and you have a blue you want to darken, you can add an orange into it and it automatically darkens the color just enough. And then as you add more, it changes the color dramatically. But it's so fascinating how paints mix together and how they what works and how it works together. Okay, so I'm going to clean that area off. I've got a little bit of contamination happening around. Too much water in there. And okay. Take some of that New Gamboge with the quinacridone red, because I can see that there's a lovely orange glow in here, and it's a small petal, so I'm just going to move quickly. And then I'm going to take some of that quinacridone red that has the phthalo green in it and is darker and put it alongside. And then I'm just going to take the quinacridone red with a little bit of the Winsor red and put it in here. Okay. And as it turns away from the light, take a little bit of that darker alizarin crimson with the phthalo green just to bring that value down, but still keep it within the reds So this is one petal, these two parts, but because one area is in the light, I'm going to take my time and do one area in the light, and then I'm going to come and I'm just going to put a little bit of that right there. And then I'll come and do the other section once it's dried enough and I don't have to worry about it bleeding into each other. Okay, and it was almost too dry to work there. But again, it's where we are where we're at. So here, let's get, again, the same, that orange. Make it glow. It looks like the sun is coming through and highlighting it. And the the quinacridone red and the Winsor red just touching the tip of it. And it's got quite the glow going on in that. Okay, I like that. I can see the shape at the top needs to be shaped more. And I've got a little bit too much into my green, so I'm just going to come and fix that by just adding a little bit, taking my paper towel and drying it off. Hey, Stephen. Welcome. Thank you very much. Okay, so let's move this over here and let's come and work. So you can see I work in a really random, it seems like a random way, but it works with watercolor to do that. Okay. I am seeing here, this is the petal that I'm seeing right here, that there is a hint of that quinacridone magenta next to the orange, the orangey red. I don't want those to mix together too much, so I'm going to leave that area dry, and then I'm going to come in with a little bit more water on my brush and a little bit more paint, and I'm going to blend that together carefully, because if you put purple and orange together, you'll get this really pretty brown. Now, I'm going to come in and water the rest of the brush. So you can see I work in different ways. As I work along, I'm thinking about where I want the paint to move to, where I don't want it to move to. Therefore, I'm going to work on how I build it up. Okay, so I'm looking over here, and I can see that it's the quinacridone red with some of the Winsor red along the edge, and I want it right to the edge. And then I'm going to come in with the plain quinacridone red and come and bring it all the way around here. And I can see that there's some dark, but now it's light, it's dry just enough that it's not pulling in too much. And let's add some more of that. And then I see that there are some darker areas here. And I'm not going to do that actually. I'll do that in the next coat. So I'm still working with the quinacridone red with a bit of the Winsor red right to the edge. And when I put the next layer on, I will put that, start to build that shape up that has cast shadows in it. I mean, these are nowhere near the value and the intensity that they're going to be by the time I finish putting the 4 or 5 or 6 layers on. Then they will be even more like intense. But it's a slow, careful, methodical process. Interesting. Okay, so why don't we come back up over here and see what we can do over here. I've done that one. let's look at this one here. I'm going to wet the whole area. I'm going to come in with that red-orange color that is the quinacridone red with the New Gamboge. And I can see, you can see where I want it to go because the yellow is right in that area. Okay, I'm going to add a little bit more of the red as I come around. And I want just the pure red right at the edge of that petal. And then I can see that I have alizarin crimson coming down here. So I'm going to you can see that already the petal is starting to dry because it's not moving. So let's get some more water on my brush and move some of the paint around and just add a little bit of water. Okay, and then I want the quinacridone red with just a touch of the phthalo green blue shade just next to that alizarin crimson, and just the nice pure reds in along the edge here and down here. Okay, that's looking good. I'm happy with that. Okay, so let's move. If that one's, we could do, this one's dry enough now. Yeah, this one's dry enough. Let's do this one. Now this one is deep dark in behind. It looked like it had a little bit of a glow, but I don't necessarily think that the glow is actually as orange as I'm seeing it. So what I'm gonna do instead is decide which is the petal here. I'm just going to put in the quinacridone red, which is the petal, yeah, okay. Quinacridone red with a little bit of the Winsor red into that lighter area. Then I'm going to take the quinacridone red and add some phthalo green blue to it. And I'm going to bring it in between here. Add some more of that red with the along the edge here. And then take that alizarin crimson with a little bit of the because it's quite dark in that corner as the crevice, as the petal goes in. Okay, so there we are. Blend those together. Okay. Wow, this petal is really neon here. And again, like this petal I did over here where I did half the petal, and here half the petal, all I'm going to do is the brighter part of that petal. I will come in afterwards. Let's grab a little bit more Quin Red here. Okay. I will come in afterwards with and make that second part of the petal blend together and look nice. Okay, so we are, whoops, needing to shut off the camera and turn it back on. Oh, I'll be glad for cinema cameras someday in the future. Oh, in the future. Okay, so I can see that there are some, that it's glowing, that light is shining through. So I want as much of that orangey red to be there to glow and show how beautiful the light is as it comes down here. And it comes all the way through to here. And then I'm going to take the quinacridone red with a little bit of the Winsor red, because that's a pretty combination. And I'm going to layer it next to it. So it really shows how pretty that orangey red is. It just shows it off. And across. And just blending it together. If it looks like there's a dry area, I just really dry my brush off so it's slightly damp, and then I can touch the edges and I'm not worried about taking too much of the paint and moving it around too much. Add more of that beautiful orangey. Can you see the glow? Do you see the glow happening there? I mean, it will happen more once I get the darker part in, but it looks to me like the light is just showing up so beautifully on it. Okay, so now we have this one here. Let's do that one here. So we have touches of the orange where the light is glowing right along here. And then that beautiful quinacridone red, which is so pretty, I have to say. I love watercolor paints. They're so pure, like you don't add any water, you just keep, you don't add any white, so that the colors stay really clear and bright and beautiful. And they really do lend themselves to painting with watercolor, that's for sure. And you notice that this is dry. I don't want it to blend too much. So I'm going to take a little bit of that quinacridone red and some of the alizarin crimson with the phthalo green, and that's still too dark. I don't want it to be that dark, just in the corner, but a little bit darker than it is. I'm going to dry my brush off, and I'm going to move that paint just to touch the edges. And take a little bit of that orange and float it back in over top of where this orange is so that it floats out and it pushes out the other paint. Hi Suzanne, welcome. I'm so glad you could make it. I love working with red because red is really a challenging color to work with for a lot of people. Watercolor, it makes it easier because you're not adding white, but it has all of these really interesting variations in them. So let's move. We're going to do this one here. I'm going to quickly just put a little bit of water. I'm not going to put a ton of water. I see that magenta is just floated there. And then I see, now this is the part that you have to be careful with, is that orangey red is close by, but I don't want it to blend together. You know what, I'll show you in a second what happens when you put those two together on purpose, like if you mix them. Add the quinacridone red, thinking about the shape of the petal, thinking about where the light is starting to disappear from. And there's that alizarin crimson with a hint of phthalo green. And then I'm going to bring down here the Winsor red and quinacridone red combination. Okay. So what happens? Let's do that. Let's do that before we call it into this day. How how far do we have? Oh, we have a few more minutes yet. So if I take that quinacridone and I add in that red orange next to it, that's great. But now let's mix them together. I'm going to take a little bit on my palette and mix them together. And you can get a strange sort of almost to, it's a strange color. And it's not the color that I'm seeing, so I don't want to blend them. I want them to sit next to each other, but I don't want them to start to blend together at all. So take that and move that away so I don't put my hand in it. Find another little piece of watercolor paper. I got lots of it. Put my hand down. Okay, so I'm happy with that. Let's come over here. I see a little bit of that quinacridone magenta. Where did I say? Okay, here. That's why I put my fingers up. Put your finger on where you're at, and then you can find where you're going to. I can see that a little bit of that is right there. And again, I don't want that reddy orange, that yellow red, or the orangey red, to get too close to it. I just want it beside it so that they're happily living near each other, but not. Yeah, let's concentrate. Okay, so you see I left a little space in between. I'm going to clean this up here and move it around. And then what I'm going to do is clean my brush, dry it off, and then blend this together by just touching them together. And there, I don't want it to blend too much. I just want it to do that. So as I come away and I come down the petal, I can see that there is more of the quinacridone red and away from that yellow, the orangey red. I'm going to take a little bit of the phthalo green and add a little bit to the quinacridone red to bring that little bit of variation in. And then I'm going to bring my alizarin crimson with the phthalo, because as I see the petal get further into the mix, it's getting darker. And I blend that a little bit together. And we can see that it blends even out a little bit here. And let that dry. Okay, so I think we have time for one more petal, and then it'll be time to wind it up. So why don't we, no, I can't do that one because it's got wet near it. Where can I move to? I think that's dry enough. Why don't we do this one here? Again, I'm seeing a little bit of that glow just at the very edge. I'm going to take that quinacridone red and add it in, and take a little bit of the Winsor red and quinacridone red and bring that next. And as I move away, and you can see I've got some yellow areas, so I'm just going to clean that up and just take my damp brush. And as it moves in towards the center and more, it's quite deep and dark in here. So we'll start that process. And we'll bring it out and let it float in and blend. Now if it's not blending, like you can see that it's quite a hard edge, clean it off, dry it off, and just tickle the paint to move it together. Okay, well I think this is a perfect place to wind it up. Am I empty? Oh, maybe I'll just bring this back. It'll take 2 seconds to bring back. You can see it. And because I'm working not very wet, I can lift it up like this. And I mean, I work with watercolor flat because you don't really want it to drip off. Though there are some people who do that, and that's also amazing. It's just not my technique. I want to thank you very much for joining me. We will see you next week. Hopefully I'm on to the, well, I will be on to the delphiniums, and hopefully my delphiniums will be blooming so I can take little things and I can show you the colors that I'm working with from the Munsell book. And I want to thank you for joining me today. This has been great. See you next week. I hope if you need rain, that you get it. And if you need sunshine, that you get what you need. Okay, take care.